Let's have the third example. We're going to create a flowchart in the pseudocode that will input 5 numbers and output how many of the numbers entered are odd or even. Let's have the solution for example number 3. For example number 3, this is already considered as an interactive loop. Interactive loop meaning you are already asking the user to input something in the loop. Okay? So let's have again analyze, or let's analyze first the problem. So for the problem, we want to input 5 numbers. Then after inputting the 5 numbers, we want to determine how many of the numbers are odd and how many are even. So in this case, if we're going to ask the user to input 5 numbers, we're not going to make use of 5 accept keywords. Instead, we're going to make use only a single accept and include it in a looping statement. So how are we going to perform that? Later on, we're going to show you using the flowchart and the pseudocode. But in this case, let us first analyze what should be the input, what must be the output, and how are we going to take the process. So for the input, we need to input 5 input numbers, 5 numbers. So in this case, we're not going to make use of num1, num2, num3, num4, num5, since we're going to include the input keyword within the loop to make it 5 times, to repeat 5 times for the input. So I'm going to assign a variable num for that. So num will be executed 5 times later on. Then for the output, we're going to determine and count. We're going to count how many are odd and how many are even. So in this case, since this is a looping statement, we need to analyze and we need to initialize already the value of even and odd to 0. Why 0? So take note that we want to count the number of odd and the number of even. So to start the counting, we should start it with initial value of 0. Then we're going to add 1 if we encounter if the number is already an odd or an even. So what should be the process? So first, we need to have the looping statement to input the value. Okay, so let's say for example, while. So we need to have a variable that counts the number of input numbers, and let's have it CTR. So CTR will be initialized to 1 on top of the loop, then less than or equals to 5, do. While CTR is less than or equals to 5, meaning until the value of CTR is not equal to 5, we're not going to stop the execution of the loop. And we started it with 1. Why? This will be represented by num1. But again, we only want to use a single variable. Okay? So for the input, so we're going to input here, we're going to input the value of num. After we input the value of num, we're going to determine whether it is an odd or an even. So how are we going to determine that? So we need to use an if statement within the loop. If our input number modulo division of 2 is equals to 0, meaning we are identifying if the input number is even. Then if it's even, we're going to count the number of even by saying even is equals to even plus 1. So we increment the counter value of even since if the number is divisible by 2. Otherwise, if it's not divisible by 2, that means it's an odd number. And an odd number is odd plus 1. So we're going to apply the process in performing and dealing with flowchart and in pseudocode. Let's do the flowchart. First, we need to have the lozenge symbol again for the start flow lines. We use the preparation symbol to initialize the value of CTR equals 1, odd 0, and even equals 0. Then I'm going to ask the user to input the value of num. After inputting the value of num, we're going to test if the number is an odd or an even. So I'm going to use if num modulo 2 is equals to 0, then if it's true, and if it's false. So if it's true, so we're going to use even process equals even plus 1. So we encounter an even number. If it's false, we encounter odd number. So odd plus 1. Then let's have a label connector here. And I'm going to connect it here. So I need to process now CTR is equals to CTR plus 1. Okay? So after getting whether the number is even or odd number, we need to increment the value of CTR to make it num2. First is num1, then after getting the num1, whether it is even or odd number, we need to increment the counter or the CTR to make it num2. Then we test the counter. If CTR is less than or equals to 5, if it's true, and if it's false. If it's true, then we're going to go back inputting the value of the new number. So I'm going to use label B since label A is a connector in counter. Label B is repeating the process if it's true. And if it's true, repeating the process meaning we're going to input another number. So I'm going to put B on this connector. Okay? And then if counter or if CTR is already less, if it's not less than or equals to 5 anymore, so meaning, for example, you already reached 6, so it becomes false. That means I need to display already. So I have to output how many are odd and how many are even. Then, end.